Imagine you are walking into a bustling emergency room. The fluorescent lights are buzzing overhead. The monitors are just, beeping relentlessly. And you are immediately presented with a scenario we are going to call Case 003.
Oh, I love a good clinical mystery right off the bat.
Right. So a patient is sitting on the edge of the bed. You immediately notice this really distinct right-sided facial droop. And when you step up to test their motor function, you find their right arm is incredibly weak. I mean, almost completely immobile.
Okay, so face and arm.
Yeah, but strangely, their right leg seems much stronger. Like it's managing to move against gravity just fine.
Well, that's a very specific physical picture, and it gets even more complicated when you try to get a history from them, doesn't it?
Exactly, because you ask them to tell you what happened. And when they try to explain what's wrong, they're speaking fluently. The words are flowing out perfectly smoothly. The rhythm and the melody of their voice sound totally normal. But the words themselves, they're entirely in the wrong order. Or they're just, the wrong words altogether. They are essentially speaking a fluent, perfectly articulated word salad.
Yeah, which is an incredibly terrifying scenario for the patient and their family. I mean, it looks like absolute chaos.
Total chaos.
But for a neurologist, or really anyone who understands neurovascular anatomy, that specific combination of deficits isn't just a random assortment of symptoms. It is a remarkably precise, beautifully logical map.
And welcome to this deep dive. Today, for you listening, our mission is to map the vascular geography of the human brain. And we're going to use this exact patient's symptoms as our compass to navigate it.
It's the best way to learn it, honestly.
I agree. And looking behind you, I see your backdrop has shifted to this glowing, highly intricate 3D map of the brain's blood vessels. I mean, it looks like a neon city grid viewed from above at night.
Yeah, I put that up because it's so vital to remember that this isn't just dry anatomy we're discussing today. We are looking at exactly how specific physical blockages in these tiny, delicate pipes can completely alter human behavior.
Language, reality itself.
Exactly. The brain doesn't just fail randomly. It fails based on exactly which pipe gets clogged. And once you understand the plumbing, you can predict the failure.
Okay, well, let's unpack this plumbing. To solve Case 003, where do we even begin looking? Because looking at that glowing map behind you, there are hundreds of branching pathways.
Right. It's overwhelming. But we start with the absolute heavy hitter of brain circulation. This is the territory where the vast majority of these classic stroke presentations occur.
The big one.
Yeah. Middle cerebral artery, or as it's almost always called, the MCA.
Okay, so to visualize this for you listening, I want you to think of the MCA like a massive roaring river system that is feeding a huge continent. It comes surging up into the brain, and then it branches out to deliver oxygen to almost the entire outer surface of the hemisphere.
That river system analogy is perfect because just like a real river, the downstream devastation you see in a patient depends entirely on where the blockage or, the dam in your analogy actually occurs.
Right. Location is everything.
So if you get what we call a stem occlusion, meaning the blockage is right at the absolute source, the main trunk of the artery before it even has a chance to branch out.
The damage has to be catastrophic.
It is. You are cutting off the blood supply to a massive portion of the cerebral hemisphere all at once.
A dam right at the source.
Mm-hmm.
What does that actually look like for the person sitting in the ER bed?
The clinical picture of a large hemispheric infarction is just devastating. You see contralateral hemiplegia, meaning complete paralysis on the opposite side of the body from where the stroke happened.
Okay, complete paralysis.
Right. And you get hemianesthesia, which is the total loss of sensation on that same opposite side. You also get a visual deficit where you lose half of your visual field in both eyes. And visibly, you will notice the patient's eyes drifting together, like as a pair, toward the side of the brain lesion.
Wait, their eyes actually drift. Why does that happen?
It's because the frontal eye fields, which they help push your eyes toward the opposite side of your body, they lose their power.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, if the left side of your brain is damaged, it can't push your eyes to the right anymore. So the intact right side of the brain simply overpowers it, pushing the eyes to the left. It's as if the brain is physically looking toward the site of its own damage.
That is eerie, really eerie. And I'm guessing a massive block like that wipes out language entirely, right?
It does. If this massive stroke happens in the dominant hemisphere, which is the left side of the brain for most people, you see global aphasia, a total devastating loss of all language function.
So they can't speak or understand anything.
Exactly. And if it happens in the non-dominant hemisphere, you get severe hemineglect. The patient essentially loses the ability to perceive or pay attention to one entire half of the universe.
Wow. But what if the dam isn't at the main source? What if that main trunk stays open, but a blockage happens, like further downstream, drying up only one specific local tributary?
This is where the clinical picture fragments and becomes highly specific. After the stem, the MCA splits into two main branches.
An upper division and a lower division, right?
Exactly. Upper division infarcts hit the motor and sensory strips on the outside of the brain. But because of how the body's map is laid out on the brain's surface, this affects the face and the arm much more severely than the leg.
Okay, so face and arm weakness. And what happens to their speech if only that upper tributary is blocked in the dominant hemisphere?
It classically produces a Broca-type aphasia.
That's the non-fluent one, right?
Yep.
Where the patient knows exactly what they want to say, their comprehension is totally intact, but the physical ability to construct and output the language is just broken. They struggle to get even a single word out.
Yes. It's incredibly frustrating for the patient because they are fully aware of their deficit. But let's look at the other tributary. A lower division infarct produces a radically different picture.
Okay, how so?
If a clot blocks the lower division in the dominant hemisphere, it produces a Wernicke-type aphasia.
Which sounds completely different.
Entirely different. This is fluent but completely nonsensical speech. The mechanical flow of words is easy and unforced, but the meaning, the comprehension is completely lost.
So they don't understand what you are saying to them.
Right, and they don't realize that what they're saying back to you makes no sense.
Which brings up a massive trap I want to highlight for everyone listening. In a busy clinic or ER, it is so easy to just lazily write, patient has aphasia on a chart. But if you just assume all aphasia is the same, you completely lose the map.
You lose the map entirely. Broca's and Wernicke's point to genuinely different vascular territories.
Right.
Non-fluent Broca's tells you the upper division of the MCA is choking. Fluent, nonsensical Wernicke's tells you the lower division is choking. There are two different branches of the river.
And if you conflate them, you're looking for the clot in the completely wrong part of the brain.
Exactly. It's a critical distinction.
And just to completely round out our MCA river system, we can't forget the tiny wires deep underground, the lenticulostria branches. These are microscopic vessels that dive deep, straight down into the center of the brain. What happens when one of those tiny branches blocks?
You get a subcortical infarct in a deep structure called the internal capsule. The internal capsule is essentially the brain's main fiber optic cable.
Oh, that's a great way to picture it.
Yeah, it takes all the motor signals generated on the surface of the brain and bundles them tightly together to send them down the spinal cord. If a microscopic stroke hits that tightly packed cable, you get pure motor hemiparesis.
So just weakness.
Right. No sensory loss, no language issues, no visual field cuts, just pure, profound weakness on one side of the body.
So a tiny clot causes massive paralysis just because of where it landed. That sets the stage perfectly for when we eventually do a whole separate deep dive on Lankener strokes.
Definitely.
But for now, I want to pivot because we just touched on how the dominant versus non-dominant hemispheres react entirely differently with language. What are some of the other bizarre, highly specific syndromes that pop up depending on which side of the brain takes the damage?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. These named syndromes are really the crown jewels of the neurological exam. Let's look at the dominant side first, again, usually the left hemisphere.
Okay, left side.
A lesion in the dominant parietal lobe can cause a fascinating cluster of symptoms known as Gerstmann syndrome.
This one is completely wild to me. One of the primary symptoms is finger agnosia. You literally lose the ability to identify, name, or distinguish your own fingers.
Right.
But you also develop a profound difficulty with calculation. Like doing basic math becomes impossible. Why on earth are fingers and math connected in the brain?
I know, it feels random until you think about how human beings develop. How do we first learn to do math as children?
We count on our fingers.
Exactly, we count on our fingers. The physical representation of our fingers in the brain is structurally wired right next to the abstract territory that processes numbers and calculations.
Wow.
So when that specific piece of real estate in the dominant parietal lobe takes a hit, you lose both concepts simultaneously.
That is an amazing aha moment. You knock out the physical fingers, you knock out the math. What else comes with Gerstmann syndrome?
You also develop right-left disorientation, meaning you cannot tell your right from your left. And finally, agraphia, which is the inability to write.
Okay, all clustered together.
Yeah, and if the lesion hits slightly differently, specifically in a neighboring area called the left angular gyrus, you can get a syndrome called alexia with agraphia.
And what's that?
This is where a patient loses the ability to both read and write, even though their spoken language might be completely fine.
Okay, those are fascinating. But the non-dominant side is what really stopped me in my tracks when reading the sources. When looking at non-dominant MCA lesions, we see something called anosognosia.
Yes.
I need you to clarify this for the listener because it
Uh,
sounds impossible. This isn't just psychological denial, right? Like, it's not a patient just being stubborn or unable to cope with the bad news of a stroke.
Not at all. This is a crucial distinction. Anosognosia is a physical hardware failure. It raises some really deep questions about consciousness and how we perceive our own reality.
How did it actually work?
The biological circuitry in the non-dominant parietal lobe is required to constantly update your brain's internal 3D map of your body. When that area is destroyed, the map stops updating.
So they literally don't know they're paralyzed.
Exactly. A patient with this syndrome might have a completely paralyzed left arm lying limply in their lap, but if you ask them to raise their left arm, they won't. And when you ask them why they didn't raise it, they will tell you they did raise it.
Wait, really? They think they moved it?
They absolutely believe they did. Or they will make up an incredibly elaborate rationalization saying, oh, my shoulder's just a bit tired today. Or even, that's not my arm, that's your arm.
That is mind-bending. The physical arm is broken, and the specific part of the brain that would usually recognize that the arm is broken is also broken. They are structurally blocked from perceiving the truth.
It is a profound deficit of self-awareness. And alongside anosognosia on that non-dominant side, you often see other perceptual deficits. You see hemi-inattention, where they ignore the entire left side of space.
Right.
And you see a phenomenon called tactile extinction.
Extinction, what does that actually look like when you test it?
Well, if you touch the patient only on their paralyzed left side, they can feel it.
Okay.
If you touch them only on their normal right side, they can feel it. But if you touch them on both sides simultaneously, their brain simply deletes the touch on the affected left side.
Just deletes it.
Yep. The healthy side of the brain essentially outcompetes and extinguishes the signal from the damaged side. And finally, with these non-dominant lesions, you often see impaired prosody.
Meaning they lose the emotional melody of their speech.
Yes. They sound perfectly fluent, the grammar is fine, but their voice is flat and robotic. They lose the ability to convey sarcasm, excitement, or sadness through their tone.
Okay, so we've established that the MCA rules the face and the arm, and it dictates language and self-awareness depending on the hemisphere. But what happens when we see the exact opposite physical pattern?
Moving on to a new territory.
Right, because this leads us right into the territory of the anterior cerebral artery, or ACA. I want to use an analogy to understand how the brain's motor map is physically laid out to explain this flip. Think of the brain's motor cortex like the wooden crossbar controlling an old marionette puppet.
Oh, I like where this is going.
The strings for the arms and the face drape over the outside edge of the crossbar. That outside edge is fed by the MCA.
Right.
But the strings controlling the legs don't hang on the outside. They hang right down the deep internal center crease of the brain, right between the two hemispheres. And that deep center crease is fed by the anterior cerebral artery.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. If an MCA stroke cuts the strings to the arms and the face on the outside, an ACA stroke cuts the strings to the legs on the inside.
So the presentation flips completely.
Exactly. It's worth noting that ACA strokes are actually quite rare. If you look at infarctions in isolation, assuming there isn't a massive bleed somewhere else first, they make up less than 3% of all acute ischemic strokes.
Wow, less than 3%.
Yeah, but when they do happen, they are striking. The classic picture is contralateral weakness that affects the leg much more severely than the arm, the literal mirror image of the MCA.
Beyond just the leg weakness, what else shows up when that inner crease of the brain loses blood flow?
Well, in dominant hemisphere ACA lesions, you can see transcortical motor aphasia.
How is that different from Broca's?
It looks similar to Broca's, the speech is non-fluent and halting, but uniquely, the patient retains the ability to repeat sentences perfectly. The repetition pathway is structurally spared.
Oh, interesting.
You also see a very classic ACA sign, sphincter incontinence, because the artery supplies the paracentral lobule, which controls bladder function. And in cases of bilateral ACA damage, which is very rare but devastating, you see ekinetic mutism, where a patient is awake but can neither move nor speak at all.
But there's one specific ACA signature that we really need to pull out of the vault today. It's a condition called abulia.
Yes, abulia.
And this one absolutely fascinated me. It's described as a striking, profound lack of spontaneous action or speech. It's not that the patient is weak. It's not that they are confused. It's an absolute absence of self-generated initiative.
It's very strange to witness.
But I have to push back here. Think about the reality of a busy hospital. If a doctor sees a patient sitting there with abulia, wouldn't they just assume the patient is severely depressed or maybe just profoundly apathetic? How do you actually spot the difference between physical brain damage and a psychiatric condition?
It is incredibly tricky, and it's why abulia is one of the more under-recognized signatures of an ACA territory infarction. It is misdiagnosed as psychiatric apathy all the time.
I can totally see that happening.
The difference lies in the specific neurological context. A patient with abulia might sit entirely motionless, staring at a wall, completely silent for hours. They have zero internal drive to move. But if you provide a loud, strong external prompt, like if you walk up and demand they perform a complex action, they will do it perfectly.
Oh, wow. So they physically can do it.
Yes. The engine of their motor system is completely fine. But the starter motor, which lives in the medial frontal lobe supplied by the ACA, is entirely offline. They cannot initiate a voluntary action on their own. They need you to be the starter motor.
They just lack the spark. Okay, so to give you, the listener, the absolute complete picture of this anterior circulation, we have to zoom in even further. We need to look at the microwiring.
The really tiny stuff.
Exactly. There are a few tiny but highly vital branches of the ACA, plus one very peculiar artery that sits off on its own. Let's start with the ACA branches. If a patient has bizarre disconnection issues where their left hand doesn't seem to know what their right hand is doing, where on the map are we looking?
We're looking at a tiny vessel called the pericallosal branch. If this artery gets blocked, the patient can present with left arm apraxia.
Let's define apraxia really quickly.
Yes.
That doesn't mean the arm is weak.
Correct. Apraxia means the muscle strength is fine, the hardware is fine, but the software is deleted.
It's a software.
Yeah, if you ask them to pretend to comb their hair, they can't coordinate the purposeful movement to do it. Along with apraxia, a pericallosal block causes agraphia and something called tactile anomia.
Tactile anomia. That means you can feel an object in your hand, like you know it's there, you can feel its shape, but you can't name it. Why does that happen?
Because it's a disconnection syndrome. The pericallosal artery supplies the anterior corpus callosum.
Okay.
The corpus callosum is the massive bridge of white matter connecting the right hemisphere to the left hemisphere. If you place a key in the patient's left hand, their right hemisphere feels it perfectly.
So the sensory part works.
Right. But to actually say the word key, the right hemisphere has to send that signal across the corpus callosum bridge to the language centers in the left hemisphere.
Oh, I see where this is going.
If that bridge is destroyed by a pericallosal infarct, the right brain knows exactly what it's holding, but it literally cannot send the message to the left brain to speak the word out loud.
A severed bridge. That is wild.
Right.
And what about the other small branch, the artery of Hübner?
The artery of Hübner is a medial lenticulostriate branch. If it occludes, it causes pronounced face and arm weakness, but crucially, without any sensory loss whatsoever.
No sensory loss at all.
None. This is because it selectively supplies a very specific motor pathway in the internal capsule, completely missing the sensory fibers. It's a pure motor deficit.
Right, that for the wild card in our microwiring section. We've talked about what happens when the main pipes fail and what happens when the tiny internal wires fail. But is there a scenario where just one tiny blockage causes a mix of everything, movement, sensation, and vision?
Oh, the wild card.
Where does the anterior choroidal artery fit into our map?
The anterior choroidal artery really does do its own thing. It produces a genuinely distinctive, highly peculiar triad of symptoms when it gets blocked.
What's the triad?
First, you get hemiparesis weakness on one side. Second, you get hemisensory loss of feeling on that same side. And third, you get a highly specific visual field defect.
This is the visual defect that completely spares the horizontal meridian, right? When I was reading up on this, I was amazed. That is incredibly precise.
It really is.
It's like having a broken TV screen that goes completely black on the top half and the bottom half, but for some reason, it still shows a perfect, crisp picture right across the middle horizontal line. How is that physically possible?
It comes down to a brilliant biological backup system. The visual cables in your brain bundle together as they travel backwards. The cables that carry the top and bottom halves of your vision rely solely on this one tiny anterior choroidal artery.
Okay.
But the cables carrying the center line of your vision, they get a secondary blood supply from a completely different artery. They have a redundant backup loop.
So they survive.
Yep. So when the anterior choroidal artery clogs, the top and bottom halves die, but that center line stays perfectly intact because the backup generator kicks in.
A built-in biological backup. That is a beautiful, if somewhat tragic example of how mathematically precise vascular neuroanatomy can be.
It really is.
So let's bring all this intense geography back to where we started. Case 003. We've built the map. Let's use it. Let's run the 30-second rule from our exam pros to solve this mystery for you right now. 30 seconds on the clock.
Let's do it.
Our patient, in case 003, has right-sided weakness, but the arm and the face are significantly weaker than the leg.
Face and arm greater than leg instantly points our compass away from the ACA. The marionette strings for the legs on the inside crease are completely intact.
Right, so it's not the inside.
The damage has to be on the outside surface. It points us directly toward the middle cerebral artery, the MCA.
Next, we evaluate the language. The patient is speaking fluently, but it's completely nonsensical. Words in the wrong order, wrong words entirely. A classic word salad.
That is Wernicke's aphasia.
Oh.
And because they have Wernicke's and not the halting, non-fluent Broca's, we know for a fact the clot is not in the upper division of the MCA.
It has to be lower.
It has to be in the lower division. And because language is affected at all, we know we are dealing with the dominant hemisphere.
So synthesizing all of that.
The anatomy just wrote itself into the chart. Face and arm predominant weakness with fluent, nonsensical speech localizes cleanly and perfectly to the dominant hemisphere lower division MCA territory. It's a Wernicke-type presentation. Case closed.
We've spent this entire deep dive treating the human brain like a highly complex machine with incredibly specific fuses. You pull the Gerstmann fuse, and you suddenly forget which is your right and left.
Right.
You pull the anosognosia fuse, and you literally, structurally deny your own paralysis. You pull the abulia fuse, and your desire to initiate any action vanishes.
It really makes you think.
It does. It leaves you with a slightly unsettling question to mull over tonight. If a millimeter-sized blood clot can instantly erase a person's ability to recognize their own fingers, or feel ownership of their own arm, or even generate the spontaneous will to speak, where exactly in all this delicate microscopic wiring does our concept of self actually live?